If you like this video, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos. My channel is running a new contest. When I hit 250 subscribers, I will be giving one lucky person $100. All you have to do is be subscribed. It is quick and very easy. April 10, 1953, Allen Dulles, the newly appointed director of the CIA, delivered a speech to a gathering of Princeton alumni. Though the tournament used to be mundane, international tensions had been jogging high. The Korean War used to be coming to an end, and previously that week, the New York Times had posted a startling story declaring that American powers returning from USA may also have been converted via communist brainwashers. Some GIs have been confessing to fighting crimes, like carrying out germ hostilities towards the communists, a cost the US categorically denied. Others had been reported so brainwashed that they had refused to return to the United States at all. As if that weren't enough, the US was once weeks away from secretly sponsoring the overthrow of a democratically elected chief in Iran. Dulles had simply ended up the first civilian director of a corporation developing greater effective through the day, and the speech supplied an early glimpse into his priorities for the CIA. In the previous few years we have turned out to be accustomed to listening to a great deal about the fighting for men's minds, the fighting of ideologies, he informed the attendees. I wonder, however, whether or not we definitely identify the magnitude of the problem, whether or not we realize how sinister the warfare for men's minds has emerged as in Soviet hands, he continued. We would possibly name it, in its new form, brain warfare. Dulles proceeded to describe the Soviet talent perversion techniques as effective, however, abhorrent, and nefarious. He gestured to the American powers returning from Korea, shells of the guys they as soon as were, parroting the communist propaganda they had heard cycled for weeks on end. He expressed fears and uncertainty. Were they the usage of chemical agents? Hypnosis? Something else entirely? We in the West, the CIA director conceded, are really handicapped in talent warfare. This kind of non-consensual experiment, even on one's enemies, used to be antithetical to American values, Dulles insisted, as nicely as antithetical to what must be human values. Allen W. Dulles, director of the Central Intelligence Agency, fear of brainwashing and a new breed of brain warfare, terrified and involved the American public for the duration of the 1950s, spurred each via the phrases of the CIA and the testimonies of brainwashed GIs returning from China, Korea, and the Soviet Union. Newspaper headlines like New Evils Seen in Brainwashing and Brainwashing vs. Western Psychiatry supplied sensational money owed of new mind control methods and applied sciences that no man ought to wholly resist. The paranoia started to flow into American culture, with books like The Manchurian Candidate and The Naked Lunch enjoying on topics of unhinged scientists and extensive political conspiracies. The concept of brainwashing additionally supplied many Americans with a compelling, nearly comforting, clarification for communism's swift rise that Soviets used the equipment of brainwashing no longer simply on enemy combatants, however on their very own people. Why else would so many international locations be embracing such a for sure backward ideology? American freedom of thought versus Soviet mind control grew to be a dividing line as stark as the Iron Curtain. MKUltra 3 days after his speech decrying Soviet tactics, Dulles accredited the starting of MKUltra, a top-secret CIA software for covert use of organic and chemical materials. American values made for right rhetoric. However, Dulles had a long way grander plans for the agency Cold War agenda. MKUltra's mind control experiments are usually headquartered around conduct change by electroshock therapy, hypnosis, polygraphs, radiation, and a range of drugs, toxins, and chemicals. These experiments relied on a variety of taking a look at subjects, some who freely volunteered, some who volunteered beneath coercion, and some who had surely no thinking they had been concerned in a sweeping protection lookup program. From mentally impaired boys at a kingdom school to American soldiers, to sexual psychopaths at a country hospital, MKUltra's packages regularly preyed on the most susceptible individuals of society. The CIA regarded prisoners in particular desirable subjects, as they have been inclined to provide consent in trade for more activity time or commuted sentences. Whitey Bulger, a former prepared crime boss, wrote of his ride as an inmate. Take a look at the concern in MKUltra. 8 convicts in a panic and paranoid state, Bulger stated of the 1957 assessments at the Atlanta jail, the place he was once serving time. Total loss of appetite. Hallucinating. The room would exchange shape. Hours of paranoia and feeling violent. We skilled horrible intervals of residing nightmares and even blood coming out of the walls. Guys turning to skeletons in the front of me. I noticed a digicam exchange into the head of a dog. I felt like I used to be going insane. Bulger claimed he had been injected with LSD. Lysergic acid diethylamide, or ACID, had come to be one of the CIA's key pursuits for its brain warfare program, as the organization theorized it should be beneficial in interrogations. In the late 1940s, the CIA obtained reviews that the Soviet Union had engaged in intensive efforts to produce LSD, and that the Soviets had tried to buy the world's grant of the chemical. One CIA officer described the organization as literally terrified of the Soviets' LSD program, generally due to the fact of the lack of understanding about the drug in the United States. This used to be the one cloth that we had ever been in a position to stumble on that surely had manageable remarkable probabilities if used wrongly, the officer testified. With the introduction of MK-Ultra, the government's activity in LSD shifted from a protective to an offensive orientation. Agency officers stated that LSD should be probably beneficial in gaining manipulate of our bodies whether or not they had been inclined or not. The CIA expected functions that ranged from doing away with humans from Europe in the case of a Soviet assault to enabling assassinations of enemy leaders. On November 18, 1953, a crew of 10 scientists met at a cabin positioned deep in the forests of Maryland. After prolonged discussions, the individuals agreed that to virtually apprehend the price of the drug, an unwitting test would be desirable. The CIA remained keenly conscious of how the public would react to any discovery of MK-Ultra. Even if they believed these packages to be fundamental to countrywide security, they should stay a tightly guarded secret. How would the CIA perchance explain dosing unassuming Americans with LSD? Precautions should be taken no longer solely to guard operations against publicity to enemy forces, however, additionally to conceal these things to do from the American public in general, wrote the CIA's Inspector General in 1957. The expertise that the agency is attractive in unethical and illicit things to do would have serious repercussions in political and diplomatic circles and would be harmful to the accomplishment of its mission. Operation Midnight Climax. The CIA's preliminary experiments with LSD have been pretty simple, if shockingly unethical. The organization usually dosed single targets, discovering volunteers when they could, now and again slipping the drug into the drinks of fellow CIA employees. Over time, these LSD experiments grew an increasing number of elaborate. Perhaps the most infamous of these tasks was once Operation Midnight Climax. A view of the historic CIA building 1955, on 225 Chestnut Street, San Francisco. The CIA was once devoting sizable interest to redecorating a bedroom. George White oversaw the indoor renovations. Not an awful lot of a decorator, White had a storied profession in the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. When the CIA moved into drug experiments, bringing White on board grew to become a pinnacle priority. White hung up images of French cancan dancers and flowers. He draped lush crimson bedroom curtains over the windows. He framed a sequence of Toulouse-Lautrec posters with black silk mats. For a middle-aged drug bureaucrat, every object evoked intercourse and glamour. George White wasn't constructing an everyday bedroom, he used to be constructing a trap. White then employed a Berkeley engineering pupil to deploy bugging tools and a two-way mirror. White sat in the back of the mirror, martini in hand, and waited for the motion to begin. Prostitutes would entice unsuspecting Johns to the bedroom, the place the guys would be dosed with LSD, and their movements located via White from past the mirror. A charge for their offerings. The intercourse employees obtained small quantities of cash, as nicely as a warranty from White that he'd intercede when the female inevitably had run-ins with regulation enforcement in the future. Though the CIA piloted these protected homes as a stage for trying out the results of LSD, White's activity shifted to some other factor of his observations, the sex. The San Francisco residence grew to be the middle of what one creator knew as the CIA carnal operations, as officers started out asking new questions about how to work with prostitutes, how they ought to be trained, and how they would cope with country secrets. The organization additionally analyzed when in the root of a sexual come upon data may want a nice be extracted from a source, in the end concluding that it was once right away after sex. But possibly unsurprisingly, plenty of White's movements have been pushed through pure voyeurism. I toiled wholeheartedly in the vineyards due to the fact it used to be fun, White later said. Where else ought to a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, rape, and pillage with the sanction and blessing of the All-Highest? The demise of MK-Ultra. The CIA's experiments with LSD continued till 1963, earlier than coming to a pretty anticlimactic end. In the spring of 1963, John Vance, a member of the CIA Inspector General's staff, discovered about the project's surreptitious administration to unwitting non-voluntary human subjects. Though the MKUltra administrators tried to persuade the CIA's impartial audit board that the lookup needs to continue, the Inspector General insisted the business enterprise observe new lookup ethics pointers and carry all the applications on non-consenting volunteers to an end. In 1977, Senator Edward Kennedy oversaw congressional hearings investigating the consequences of MKUltra. Congress delivered in a roster of ex-CIA personnel for questioning, interrogating them about who oversaw these programs, how members had been identified, and if any of these applications had been continued. The hearings became over several annoying details, in particular about the 1953 suicide of Dr. Frank Olson, an Army scientist who jumped out of a resort window several days after unwittingly ingesting a drink spiked with LSD. Amid developing criminalization of drug users, and simply a few years after President Nixon declared drug abuse as public enemy wide variety 1, the ironies of the US's troubling experimentation with pills regarded in sharp relief. But at some stage in the hearings, Congress stored hitting roadblocks. CIA staffers claimed they couldn't remember small print about many of the human experimentation projects, or even the range of humans